Buenos días. Good morning, everybody. Bear with me, mi voz acá, tengo algo de verla, pero me siento bien. No tengo calentura, que no se me vea contagiar. Okay, I'm fine. Just bear with me with my, whatever it is, my throat problem, but I'll be good. I want to welcome you all. Bienvenidos a todos to our 34th Annual Children with Disabilities Information Coalition Conference. We're very proud that we're still here. We're going strong, and we love it. So, you know, as always, CDIC strives to bring the best of the best. Experts in the field of parent support who will give you dynamic and viable and real information to help you. So we also include important and viable information to help you navigate, you parents, to help you navigate systems and obtain supports and resources that will promote success for you and your child. You know, overcoming COVID was tough for all of us, and it reminds me of the resiliency of parents and their children. It certainly was no easy task, right? It was hard, it was horrible for all of us. But it did make us stronger, and we learned a lot about ourselves, didn't we? We learned a lot about ourselves going through such a crisis. We discovered yet again our vulnerabilities, but such a crisis also emphasized our strengths. So in certain ways, this tragic experience that we lived just a couple of years ago, a year ago, in certain ways it reminds me of much of the journey that parenting with a child encompasses. Parenting a child with a disability. It's never easy, we know that, but it makes us stronger. So, and here we are, ready to tackle whatever life throws at us, right? So I wish you the best for today and learn as much as you can so you can meet the challenges head on with your child, your family, and this is what we're all about. So I appreciate your being here. It's wonderful so that we can continue obtaining the information and the support that you need. So at this point, I would like to thank the people, the team that made this happen. First of all, the volunteers, and I think Patricia, you'll probably go into that, but thank you to the volunteers. You're a very important part of this. You make it happen, you help us. The staff members, these people are here with CDIC day in, day out. They're the ones that make it happen as far as giving the supports to parents, the information, making sure that the projects and the activities that CDIC is in charge of, making sure that it happens. And so at this point, I'm going to call out the staff, and then if you're in here, please raise your hand or let us know. The staff is led by Paso Santibáñez, our project director. Lourdes Torres, that lady is the tech person and everything under the sun. So she really is there every step of the way. And then we have Josue Gutierrez and Estefania Garcia. Is Josue here? There he is. And so these two individuals, two dynamic youth, lead the leadership for youth and for adults. And so also we have Diana Serrano, I think she's out there. Diana Serrano is in charge of providing training for parents, leadership training in the colonias. So again, she's a new person and we welcome her. And then at this point, I would like to present the board of directors. As board of directors for CDIC, our responsibility is to make sure that all the goals and objectives are met, and that the staff receive the support that they need. And so it's very important because we oversee the monitoring of the grants that the feds and the state government gives us. And so if you can please stand, our Vice President, Ernestina Perez. I understand that Martina Armendariz, the treasurer, is here. And Margie Marquez, dynamic secretary. She works really hard with us. She's not here today. She's having knee problems, but she gives all of you her regards. And then members at large are Adriana Casado. Irene Rodriguez. And our new member, Norma Garcia. So together, this is the seated team. Together, we all make it happen. And I really appreciate everybody. Thank you for all that you do. Is Mr. Rick Lasso here? Okay, so we'll see that. We'll save for the meeting. We want to recognize Rick Lasso because he's been pretty much, we want to call him the father of the youth leadership in El Paso. Where all the other youth leaderships in Texas folded, he kept on going for years. So he's been all alongside making sure that it continues. And so we have him to thank for that. So at this point, and last but not least, please, Mr. Juan Alderete, let's give it up for Mr. Juan Alderete. He's the special ed director for the Region 19 Education Service Center, and if it weren't for our partnership with them, we couldn't have the conference here. So we thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. President. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Let's try that one more time, see if we can get everybody going at the same time. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. That sounds a lot better. Now we can go ahead and kick off this conference, right? It's a pleasure to be here this morning. My name again is Juan Alderete. I'm the Director of Special Education for the Education Service Center. How many of you have heard about the Education Service Center? Raise your hand. We got a few folks here, so this is going to be an opportunity for me to share with you what the Education Service Center does, what is our purpose, and what is it that we do. The Education Service Center, Region 19, means that we are number 19 of 20 service centers around the state of Texas. The Texas Education Agency has put out almost 20 offices, per se, of an extension of the education agency. And so the Education Service Center is responsible for helping communities, schools, and agencies to better understand the educational system. And so what we do is what we're doing here today. We collaborate with organizations such as CDIC and other organizations to be able to bring information and provide training to teachers, principals, superintendents, parents, and the community in general. As a director at the Education Service Center, I have staff who, some of them will be presenting here today in some of your sessions. And so for my department, we focus a lot on providing opportunities for training for teachers, for principals, for paraprofessionals, school staff in general, but also for parents. We also host different conferences that many of you have heard about. Next in May, we will be hosting the Autism Conference, where we will have a full day of sessions for parents. We also focus on making sure that school staff come to those trainings. Education Service Center has trainings for parents that are free of cost. Some of them do have a cost. But we always try to partner up with schools to make sure that we're making that collaboration and that we are triangulating the information between schools, parents, and the service center or the agency. One of our main tasks is to make sure that you all as parents and educators have the information that you need in order to be able to do exactly what that sign back there says, and that is to empower the ability. Is it always a very pleasant experience? Well, as Ms. Carmen said, just like with COVID, we have to learn a lot of new things. We have to rely on a lot of people. We have to rely on each other. And so as parents, and on a personal note, when we have a child with a different ability, and that we're having to go through a process to understand and to learn how we can empower that ability so that that person can have a successful outcome, be able to experience education and be able to experience life as best as possible. Making sure that we focus on the ability, not the disability, is something that we all strive for. So I think today, and part of the work that CDIC has done, as part of their mission, and part of the work that they're doing, is to empower, to advocate, to make sure that we are aware of what are the new things that are coming up. How do we rely on different people, different resources? How can we make connections? Because it is only through those connections and only through that alignment that we can get through the toughest of times, just like we did with COVID. And so today, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to see many of you. I see a lot of friendly faces. I see a lot of friendly folks that I've talked to in the past, that I've helped. But more importantly, I see things that have helped me better understand what are the needs of our community. And so today, I'm just here to say welcome, enjoy the conference, enjoy the learning. When we look around this room, each and every one of us are dealing with a circumstance that we want everybody else to know about. When you see your friends, when you see your community members, when you see your relatives, many times we all have a need for something in our schools, for something in our own personal lives. Disability is something that is part of our community. And so when I look around the room, I'm so happy to see that you all are here, because you then become the voices for not only for CDIC, but for the educational community and other resources. In our area, we have approximately in our schools, we have approximately 18,000 kids, children, school-age children, that have been identified as having a disability. In our area, we address approximately 187,000 kids in our educational system. Out of those 187,000 kids, there's approximately 18,000 that have been identified as having a disability or attending special education. I want us to go ahead and share this information that you learned here today with others, so that more people can become aware and more people can continue to empower the ability of having different abilities. Today, I'm here to celebrate with you, to learn along with you, and to say thank you to CDIC for putting this conference together and the many more to come. Thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over back to Ms. Carmen Ramirez, and she'll go ahead and introduce you, the person that will be speaking to you. Have a blessed day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. Thank you very much. Okay, so I want to thank, CDIC wants to thank Lisa Marenco for the centerpieces. Aren't they really cute? And the whole team, Lisa, so much. But you know what? They're so cute, but you can't take them. It's okay. Maybe next time. But, and we also want to thank AmeriGroup for the sponsorship. They're always there every step of the way, so we really thank AmeriGroup. And so now I want to introduce to you a dear, dear friend of mine, a wonderful person who, as we've held hands, we've been there for each other throughout the years, and she's taught me a lot. My son was like 10 years old. We were talking about that earlier. We were trying to remember, hey, how long ago have we been partners in crime? And Danny was, well, it's been 30 years, okay? So I'm very proud to tell you about Dr. Turnbull, Ann Turnbull. She has taught special education at the University of North Carolina, at the University of Kansas. She and her husband would lead the Beach Center on Families and Disabilities some time ago, and that went really strong. She's always been involved with the parents, and she's a champion for the rights of parents and children with disabilities and the support that they need, because she herself was a mother of a young man with autism. And she lived the experience, so she knows what she's talking about. She's author of 2 leading textbooks, and these are textbooks that go throughout the universities in the country to prepare and teach the future teachers, principals, counselors, you name it, every personnel in the school districts or in the schools. She's the author that provides those textbooks to teach them about disability, about special education, about the IDEA law, about inclusion. And she's a recipient of many national awards. She was selected as one of 36 leaders who changed the course of history for people with disabilities. Please help me welcome with a long and loud applause, well-deserved, for Dr. Ann Turnbull.
Thank you, my dear, dear friend Carmen. Carmen and I have been friends, we figured last night, for 31 years. Now that's a long time, isn't it? Think about what friends in your life have you been really bonded with for 31 years. And she said she's learned from me, I've learned so much from her. And she is such an inspiration in terms of early on bringing a very nationally significant and impactful lawsuit on behalf of her son Danny to experience inclusion. My husband is a lawyer who specializes in disability rights, and he was so impressed with me. I earned points from him when I told him 31 years ago that I got a call from a mother named Carmen Ramirez. And he said, "Oh, the Daniel R.R. case?" Oh boy, did I gain points when he knew that I had talked directly with Carmen. So thank you, my dear friend, for being so wonderful as a local, state, and national trailblazer. So I want to do a time check to start with. And is it correct that I go until 9:35? Program check. Yes, okay, great. I'll honor that. And I have so much that I want to share with you, and I need the clicker or recognizing. There it is. Thank you. Yeah, okay. I thought about, what topic, well, let me back up 75 years old. I am an old geezer. I started teaching in the field of special education when I was 22. So I've been at this over 50 years. As Carmen said, I've been at this as a parent of a son with multiple disabilities, autism, intellectual disability, and his toughest disability was a bipolar disorder. And he could really take us to the next level in our learning, my husband and I would always say. But we would say he often would give us the test before, he'd give us the final exam before we'd have the course. Because every time we would figure out kind of one thing, then we had the opportunity to learn yet more, from things that unfolded over his life. It's hard for me to talk about him in the past tense. Jay died very suddenly and out of the blue. He was 41 years old, which was 11 years ago. We never could have predicted it. He was healthy. There was absolutely no sign that this was going to happen, and the unthinkable happened. He still lives so much in our hearts, and his spirit lives so much in our universe, that as I talk about him, it's hard for me to use past tense because I feel he will always be present. But as a parent for these years of his life, Jay was a biological son of my husband's from a first marriage, and he was 7 when Rudd and I married. So Jay was part of my life for 34 years, 34 wonderful years. And then I have worked at the university, and my husband, as a lawyer, has worked at the university in special education. So between our family experience and 2 jobs, we really have done a 24/7 disability. And I thought, what can I best share with you of what I've learned over the decades that can withstand the test of time? And that's what I want to share with you this morning. I want to start with just some policy foundations of what I like to refer to as trusting partnerships. I want to really focus on how you in your roles can form the kinds of partnerships with others who can be helpful, especially educators, but also neighbors, people in your faith community, people in other aspects of your community, people in your extended family, that will enrich the quality of life of your loved one with a disability as well as all family members. And I want to do that first within a policy context. Now, I said that Carmen brought one of the first, I think, inclusion federal cases, lawsuits, on behalf of her son Danny and others with disabilities. And that was in, Carmen, the year was 1986. So that was a long time ago. I want to tell you about the most recent case. So we know about Carmen on the front end, now what's happening most recently. And most recently is what we call the Andrew case. This is Andrew, a boy with autism, whose family experienced him. He was diagnosed at about the age of 2. He progressed in his early childhood years. But when he went to school, the teachers and the other IEP team members didn't know how to support his challenging behavior. And so they would call his mother to come pick him up. That was how they would handle tough situations. And his mother and his father would sit down with him to see what the school could do, you know, not what they could do to come rescue the situation. And this, in talking with the administrators of the school district in Colorado, they were asking for positive behavior support that was research-based, that would be effective in teaching Andrew social and emotional and behavioral competence. And the administrators just pushed back. And one of the administrators, I don't know if it was a principal or a superintendent, but said to Mr. and Mrs. F, they don't like their last name to be known, Mr. and Mrs. F, if you don't like it, sue me. And you know what Andrew's parents said? Okay, yeah, we'll do that. If that's what it's gonna take, we don't wanna do that. We'd rather work it out in this meeting, but we can do that if necessary. So, Mr. and Mrs. F brought a due process hearing, which is the right of every parent of a child with a disability to bring a suit, I mean, not a due process hearing isn't considered a suit, but to have an opportunity to present their side of the issue, the school present their side, and to have a judge make a determination. I have testified in a number of due process hearings, and it really feels like a court case. Often it's in a courtroom with a judge where you decide, the judge decides who's right. And Andrew's parents lost, you know, at 4 points. Did they give up? They came close to giving up, they said, but every time they thought about the administrator saying, sue me, they thought, well, we'll go to that level. And they took it to the Supreme Court, and it was a unanimous decision in favor of Andrew. And what the law had said up until this point is that children with disabilities were entitled to a free, appropriate public education. And what this lawsuit said is, oh no, they are entitled to more. They are entitled to a free, appropriately ambitious education. So that takes it up a step. And they must have challenging objectives, not the same old every year. And they must make progress. And if they don't make progress, then it is not a sufficiently, that is not an appropriately ambitious education. Now, let me ask this, can people get a copy of the PowerPoint? Will that be posted? And so if you can get a copy of the PowerPoint online that you can download, then I see some of you taking notes, which is fine to take notes, but I just want you to know that a copy will be available. So sometimes I feel when I'm taking notes, it runs in my ear, down my arm, on my hand, and I would rather have time to think. Okay, so what is the role of families, you know, in this appropriately ambitious education? That the family role is shared decision-making. What does shared decision-making mean? Because so often we know as families that we go into meetings and we have decisions told to us rather than really participating in making the decisions. How many of you have had that experience? Yes, a number of you. So what the law said right after the federal law was passed is that the meeting serves as a communication vehicle between parents and school personnel and enables them as equal equal, joint, partnership, not top down, not power over, but equal. And that's what I want to talk with you about. Now, let me ask you how many of you, if you were a parent of a child with a disability, kind of stretch yourself a bit, and would you stand up? If you have a child with a disability. Okay. So the vast majority of you have children with disabilities. Now, if you go to meetings, IEP meetings, how many of you find that you are mostly silent at meetings because you're having things told to you? If you feel you're mostly silent, then sit down. Okay, that's great. If you feel you may, look around. Probably about half of the people here felt they're mostly silent. And you were the people who were coming out on Saturday to conferences. What about the meetings, the families who don't come out? And how silent might they be? If you feel you make 2 or 3 comments, but you really don't change very much of what is being recommended, then sit down. Okay. If you feel like of the meetings, the IEP meetings, that maybe professionals handle about 75% and you contribute about 25%, if that characterizes you, then sit down. Okay, and then if you feel it's about 50-50, that you feel you are having a partnership, then sit down. And we've still got some people standing. What would characterize you? Would it be you're 75% and the school is 25%? 10%, okay. So you're 90% and the school is 10%. How about you? Okay. So let's all sit down and let's all give ourselves, wherever we are on the continuum, around the Well, let me tell you what research shows. A comprehensive 16-year review of all of the studies that have been published on what happens at IEP meetings concluded that the intention of families being equal partners to develop IEPs is not being realized. And you knew that already from the vote we just took. But researchers spent a couple of years studying what you knew already. That it's mostly a top-down process. So let's talk about what could be some of the key concepts of trusting partnerships. So when I think of a partnership, I think it's different than a collaboration. I think a partnership is when there are roughly equal or joint, whether it's the same percentage, but joint rights and responsibilities, and that there is an alliance with each other. And what about trust? To what extent have IEP meetings been contexts of trust? I'll say this. I remember hearing a mother who was going through chemotherapy saying, I'd rather go get another round of chemotherapy than go to my child's IEP meeting. I thought, oh wow, that's pretty severe. That I think for the most part, whether we are professionals, which I am also, or family members, the IEP meeting is generally not something we look forward to. Is that agreeable? Would that thinks one of their best days is their IEP meeting? Please raise your hand. Okay. When Jay graduated from high school, it was this wonderful relief. No more IEP meetings. That was the graduation gift he gave his parents. Yeah. So, but what does trust mean? How could we get such trust in meetings that we would look forward to being there, just like we look forward to being with our friends who we trust, as we had this wonderful day yesterday together. And so what is a trusting partnership? What I want to talk with you about is how can we create the IEP meeting, but all contexts, so that we really trust, as families, we trust the professionals, and as professionals, we trust families. That it's a reciprocal partnership where everyone leaves feeling fulfilled rather than drained. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, let's see, challenge me. Can I get us there in 45 minutes more? Okay, I want to tell you about seeing this in action. I have only seen the height of the most beautiful trusting partnerships across the school in one school. I've seen, isolated or a few teachers doing wonderful things with families and a few families really extending themselves to teachers in a trusting partnership. But in one school, I saw it all. It was in the air. You could breathe it. And this is a charter school in Los Angeles called WISH. And it was started by parents. That was a significant factor as an elementary school. And it was so wonderful. The families and the teachers said, this can't stop. So they created a charter for middle school. And the middle school, at the end of those students graduating, said, oh my goodness, we can't stop. We've got to create a high school. And they did. And so students have the privilege, everyone has the privilege of being in WISH all the way through. But I had a discussion with parents of what is your IEP meening like? What was it like before WISH, when your child went to a different school, and what is it like now at WISH? And the parents described before WISH, they felt they were going to a fight. They felt that there was going to be a super, super battle. And these are their words, always a struggle. One father said he would spend hours studying the draft IEP to find out exactly what he was going to argue about when he got to the meeting. And then he said he got to the meeting, and he almost fell off his chair at the first meeting, but it was so wonderful. And people were bringing up what it had taken him hours and hours to come up with. And they used, I thought it was so interesting, so many of the parents used the phrase, it was like night and day. Night before and day at WISH. And it's such a collaborative process. Everything explained so thoroughly, exceeding expectations. That's what the Andrew F case is about. Appropriately ambitious. And difference between night and day from previous school. So what is the chemistry of the WISH school? One father was talking about the sense of community in the school. So it's not just the IEP meeting, but people, he said, when we're just drop our children off, or if we go to volunteer in the classroom, that we feel such community with the teachers and the paraprofessionals and the administrators and students. It sends a message to the kids that they are loved and how much they're cared for, because so many parents are there and so many volunteers are there, because they want to be part of this experience. And I might mention at this school, there are no pullouts for children with disabilities. There's no resource rooms, there's no special education classrooms, there's no pullout for speech therapy or physical therapy. All services are provided in the general education class with co-teachers, a teacher, a general ed, and a special education teacher. And I love this. The teacher said, one teacher, gosh, last year my kid was in Mrs. Casey's class, and so they had an email out, oh, we need this for birthdays of the month. And I swear that if it took more than 10 minutes to get back online, you were not going to get on the list of stuff to contribute. It's crazy. But as far as the community goes, I've never seen a school like this. Parents were so eager to get that they were so quick to volunteer, that so many families got closed out because they didn't happen to be online and they couldn't respond in 10 minutes. And what did the teachers say? The teachers talked about how present the families were, and that the families would share about their child. There was such valuable information. Having a close, positive relationship with parents made it easier to have difficult conversations. Isn't it so much better for us as families to hear bad news about our child when we've heard a lot of good news? And when we really trust the person, that they're not just looking on the problem side of our child, they see the strengths, they treat him with dignity, and there are these challenges that they're facing now. What a difference that makes. And so teachers talked about this power of being together with families. Now, when I think about this kind of start looking at this where it says what on the right-hand side, and read with me, read out loud. What goes around comes back around. Now, right now, I want you to take your hand up in the air. Come on, do this with me. And let's read this again and say, what goes around comes back around. Let's do it one more time. What goes around comes back around. I want that to be your motto, because what I've learned in the 53 years that I've been in the field as both a professional and a family member is the more empathy as families we extend to professionals, the more empathy they extend to us. As the more empathy the more kindness we as professionals extend to families, the more kindness they extend to us. That works in our family and parenting. It works with our neighbors. It works in all of our relationships. It works with our physicians. It works with nurses. It works with therapists. And it works with the IEP team. And what I felt for a long time, because there were years when Jay's education was anything but appropriate. And Rudd and I, and certainly not appropriately ambitious, and Rudd and I had to advocate so hard. I thought for a long time that my best strategy was to be tough, and to be knowledgeable, and to push, and to insist. And believe me, there are times we have to find our corner. My father had an expression, and I don't want to offend any of you, and so I'll leave blank, but you can fill it in. He would say, damn a man, I hope damn doesn't offend you, but that's not the worst. Damn a man who won't be a SOB when his time comes. And you probably know what SOB stands for. But I'll soften it and say, damn a man who won't be a jerk when his time comes. There's sometimes when we tried and tried and tried to be kind and empathetic and partnering and trust, and there comes a time that a line has been crossed and we have to fight our corner. And at that point, we need to step up and do that, be that person. I said, yeah, does that apply to women too? I said, of course. So, I said, good, because I do that. But most of the time, 95% of the time, 98% of the time, if we extend kindness and thoughtfulness and trust, then it's going to work beautifully. And after I went to WISH, I spent a day there, and I was doing these discussion groups with teachers and with families, with administrators, and I left there and I could have just floated back to my hotel. Because for years I've been working on family professional partnerships. One of my textbooks is on family professional partnerships. And I've never really seen the ultimate in action. And when I went back to my room, I called Run, who was at home, and I said, Run, I don't have words to put this in, what I experienced today. I said, but I feel like Martin Luther King. And he said, what are you saying, ma'am? And I said, remember Dr. King? And here's the quote, I just want to do God's will, and he's allowed me to go to the mountain, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I went, but I want you to know that tonight that we see as a people, we will get to the promised land. And that day, I saw the promised land. And with all due respect to Dr. King and his vision for civil rights, for me that day, the promised land was the essence of trust among everyone in the school, including all of the students with and without disabilities. And I just thought, this really can happen. So, what does research say about trusting partnerships? This is what we know from many, many studies for students. Students whose parents and other and family members, whether that's a guardian or a foster parent or a grandmother or whoever that adult is in a child's life, that when that family and the professionals bond in a trusting partnership, students have better achievement. Their grades are better. They improve in their behavior. They're less likely to be suspended. Listen to that. How many of you have dealt with suspension? It is a painful thing to deal with suspension. And it is a known fact that parents who have a trusting partnership with professionals, the professionals are more likely to come up with other sanctions and not suspension. And also, students are more likely to have appropriate behavior, so there's no need for a sanction. And improves standardized test scores. Aren't those 4 things? Isn't that what we all want for our children? Now, for families, there's research that documents we have less family stress when we have a trusting partnership, when we have a higher family quality of life. Run and I have had some of the most conflictual relationships. They're not partnerships. And we've had some of the most trusting. And I know this is not only research, but reality, that our stress was less and quality of life was better when things were going so well with the IEP team and with Jay's support, that we didn't have to constantly strategize about how are we going to fix this situation. Teachers report greater job satisfaction. Research shows one of the most frequent reasons why teachers leave the profession satisfaction is their stress and feeling overwhelmed from dealing with parents, especially when there's this. And how many of you are teachers or other IEP students? Raise your hand. Okay. You know that there is greater job satisfaction when families have your back, right? And there's more assistance for student progress when everybody is working together to accomplish those IEP goals and the challenging objectives that the Andrew F. case required. So there's every reason for us to really seek a trusting partnership. So I want you to see a framework that, I need some help in advancing this slide. So happy to have help from this nice gentleman. Okay, so should I point it to the screen or to the machine? To the machine. Okay, thank you, sir. A trusting partnership. I appreciate him, and I want him to know that his job is so valuable to me. So I want you to look at I call this the sunshine model of trusting partnerships. And look in the inside circle. I don't know if you can read that, if it's too small. So starting up at 12 o'clock in the inside circle, equity, respect, communication, advocacy, and commitment. We're going to talk about those for the rest of the session. That's how we all want to be treated. That's how professionals can treat families and how families can treat professionals. That's what it means. That's the what of what goes around housework. Demonstrating those 5 behaviors. The sunbeams, the points, are the different contexts in which we make educational decisions together. Academic learning, social emotional learning, behavior, student assessment, special meetings, the IEP meeting, the 504 plan meeting, the transition planning meeting, student transitions across the age span, and school capacity enhancement, where teachers and IEP staff and families work together to make things better at school. And what this framework says is that we want those 5 principles of partnership, the equity, respect, and communication, and so forth, to be infused into each of those sun rays. Now, my colleagues and mostly former students, my husband and I, one of our textbooks is on the sunshine model. It is the textbook that is used in courses to prepare general and special education teachers to partner with families. And we have a whole textbook on this, and it's a whole course on this, and I've got 25 minutes to put that course to you, to hit highlights. So in terms of some narrowing, I'm going to talk about, as you know, from this point on, special meetings. I'm going to talk about that Sunday. And the special meeting is the IEP meeting. And we're going to talk about how to infuse those 5 principles: equity, respect, communication, advocacy, and commitment into IEP meetings. Okay? And I'm going to take the challenge. I'm going to try to propose a way to have IEP meetings that you will look forward to. And that on the drive home, or ride home, or walk home from the meeting, you will say, what a breath of fresh air. Truly, what goes around comes around. That's the outcome I want. Okay, so we're going, let me just hit at this 5 dimensions of partnership equity is adding supports and resources that enable everybody to have opportunities for equal outcomes. So some parents and some professionals need more support at given times and given situations in order to have a trusting partnership. An example, a parent who can't get off from work to attend an IEP meeting. How do the others arrange the meeting so it's possible for the family to come, even if it's inconvenient to the professionals? But for a teacher, how about a teacher who has a chronic illness and can't be available for an evening meeting? How can the family accommodate the teacher even if the family can't get off from work? How do you find a different situation because the teacher needs an equitable support to attend because the teacher has extenuating circumstances? Often we think of how can professionals accommodate and support families, but we need to give just as much attention to how can families accommodate and support teachers. Because if we do both of those, that's when we have the magic. That's when the magic happens. Okay, let's look at commitment or respect. Conveying a sense of admiration for good or valuable qualities. Also having genuine concern for each other's needs and feelings. Parents who are embarrassed that they can't help with homework due to their lack of education. You know, then the teacher does not expect them or correct them for not helping with certain homework, but looks for solutions like an after-school homework program or volunteer. How do we handle that situation so the family does not lose dignity and the family is disrespected? And let's look at a teacher who's getting backlash from the school community for being gay. I heard from a wonderful teacher just this morning who talked about how the parents tell her what the principal is saying behind her back. And some of this has to do with her sexual orientation identity, and some of it has to do with her commitment for inclusion. And if that teacher wants to raise her hand and identify herself, do, and there she is. And if she wants to not be identified, C.C. Harrison. Because C.C. so much has the back of her families, they have her back. And they want her respected, and they don't like it when the principal disses her. Isn't that wonderful? So, we could go through each of these, and time will not permit, but when you get a copy of the handout, and I hope you will go to the website, and you will print it, or you will look at it on the website, and you can see these examples of communication, advocacy, and commitment of what often families need and what professionals need, and how we can be reciprocal. On professionals, I want to make one point. One of the least addressed topics in universities preparing teachers, general and special, to graduate and to be licensed and to teach is preparing teachers to be advocates. And in this, let me do this advocacy one. Taking action to solve problems or remove barriers in order to accomplish valuable outcomes. And the student who needs medication for ADHD that parents cannot afford, what can be done at the school level to advocate that you don't just skip that student by as done so often, and then a student for whom I am advocating very hard now, who is on the birth to prison pipeline and is in prison for life for murder. But it was identified in 4th grade he needed ADHD medication. His family had never been to a doctor. They didn't have the money to for an appointment, to get a prescription, or to pay for a prescription, so he never got a prescription. And yet he was suspended over and over and over and over again for days and weeks because of his disruptive behavior. As professionals, we can't tolerate that. And it's our job to speak up and to look at the public health center in the community, to work with the principal, the school nurse, the PTA, that often we think is parents' roles to advocate. It is also professionals' roles to advocate. And he would not be spending his life. Nobody who failed him, and not only that, but in so many other ways in his education that I've reviewed every word of a record written on him, and I know for a fact, no one who failed him dozens and dozens of times has a consequence for that. And he pays the big consequence of life in prison. We can't let that happen. So I want you to look at all of those when you get the handout. We come to the sunshine model, and I want to go to skip a couple of slides and watch my time here. I like to think of 7, I call them components. 7 components of the IEP meeting. And we're going to talk about each one briefly and what professionals can do and what families can do to build trust. The first component is to prepare in advance. And so often IEP meetings just start when they start rather than background work to make sure they go well. But some of the things here in preparing in advance, one of the most effective strategies for preparing families for an IEP meeting is to hold a pre-meeting. And the pre-meeting can give the family a draft, if a draft is being prepared. It can share evaluation results. It can share questions for the families to think about. And families can tell what's on their mind. And then with that pre-meeting, then the IEP meeting can be planned with knowing what's important to both parties. So a pre-meeting, through research, we know it makes a significant difference in families being an equal partner rather than getting all of this information in the IEP meeting and having such a hard time comprehending it. I mean, I have my doctorate in special education. I've written a book about IEPs, and it was just a couple of years after the federal law was passed. It was the first book about how you develop IEPs. I get intimidated in IEP meetings because often I would hear bad news, and I would get information about the draft for the first time, and I couldn't take it all in, even though I had a lot of expertise. What about families who don't have that expertise? That's why a pre-meeting is so important. There are other things. Provide written information about IDEA. Refer families to professionals can refer families to this program. To partner with families who are leaders in knowing how to be in IEP meetings, and arranging for an interpreter, arranging the convenient time and location rather than just assigning a time and location. Even though that's hard for the professionals, it's also hard for families, and especially families who have the kinds of jobs that they can't take off from. And if they take off from, they get docked in pay or get fired. You know, so what can be done. All of those things build trust. But now let's look at what can families do in advance. They can attend the pre-meeting and be prepared for it and not just walk in without thinking of having thought about their questions. They can attend workshops like this one and other workshops put on by the coalition. If there's a draft IEP, make sure you get a copy, make notes on it. You know, write down circle every jargon word you don't understand. Underline everything that is talking about things that are just not clear to you. Write your questions down so that when you go, you're prepared as a family and parents. You have a responsibility to go to that meeting with information and having done your homework. Let's see. Arrange the logistics of childcare and transportation and time off, and reschedule the meeting if you need to. Ask a friend to go with you. Ask a family member. I did not feel comfortable going to IEP meetings by myself. Rod and I always went together. And if we couldn't go together, we would reschedule. You know, it's intimidating as parents to be in a group of 4 or 5 or 6 individuals, especially when you know that your child has been in a downswing and there have been problems going on. So take someone with you that can be an advocate. And where is it? On the bottom of this, either professionals or families, consider having the student attend. Even if the student is young and maybe they only attend for the first 5 or 10 minutes, and they say what they like most about their school day and what they like least. And then they don't have to be there for the whole meeting, but often students will even say things at meetings that they've not said to their parents, because the meeting is a context that enables them to think of things that maybe they don't think about when they're home. I have a grandson who experiences ADHD and dyslexia, and he is now a senior in high school. And he has always gone to his IEP meetings, and as he got to middle school and high school, he would attend the whole meeting. And he would sometimes, he learned to say, that doesn't work for me. Or after lunch, when my medication is worn off and my brain is just really loose, I really shouldn't be having my nap times. I need to have that in the morning. And he has learned, and now he's off to college, and he's going to know how to advocate for himself with his teachers because he's had all these years of advocating. And even Jay with significant intellectual disability, an IQ way below 50, where he was not able to comprehend the IEP, but especially with a teacher who was really, unfortunately, weak and was always very negative. We had Jay come to the meeting for the first part, and I said to him, Jay, I want you to know that everyone here is here because they are so committed to your education. And in fact, with this teacher, she really wasn't. Every other teacher was, but she wasn't. But by saying that, it set a tone. And then he stayed at the meeting, and the meeting was much more positive because people didn't want to say the things that they had said to just rather me in the past in front of him because they didn't want to hurt his feelings. So his presence made the meeting more positive. So, and look at this last thing, brings facts. Teachers are tired and hungry, just like families are tired and hungry. We're all tired and hungry. What would a platter of chocolate chip cookies do for a meeting? It kind of gives people a lift, doesn't it? It's a thoughtful gesture. It doesn't take much on the part of whoever it is. Or maybe if the student's gonna bring their favorite snack. Maybe I remember in one situation, the student's favorite snack was marshmallow Rice Krispies. And that wasn't the favorite snack of the adults there. But the teacher made the marshmallow Rice Krispies and brought them, and the parent says, oh my gosh, she knows that this is our daughter's favorite snack. And it meant so much to them that she not only brought a snack, but she brought the favorite snack. So those are things that can build trust. Okay. Now, the second component is a welcome and an introduction at the meeting. And don't just jump right into the evaluation results that the families are dreading to hear. But first of all, for teachers, you may be surprised, and you may not be, but how many IEP meetings parents have attended when they maybe know just the names of one or two people there. And even if people are introduced, we all know how hard it is to remember names the first time you hear them. And believe me, when you're 75, it's harder than when you're 65 or 55. So the older we get, the harder it gets. And we need to make name tags or table tents with names and roles. Who is the physical therapist here? You know, who is the paraprofessional here? This is especially important with the new school year, when families are meeting people just for the first time. To start every meeting highlighting a strength of the student. And something that the parent has done that has particularly been helpful. So you are positively affirming the teacher and the family. And you're inquiring how are things going at home, especially for families who have just had a death in the family, or a family member with surgery, or some kind of situation. To be empathetic, to be care that things are especially hard. And now what can families do? If there are no introductions, ask for them. Or pass a piece of paper around and ask people to print their name. So you can have you don't have a name in front of you. If you need to leave early, let people know. And the same for professionals. Because one family member said, it was a quote on a slide that I skipped, but listen to this quote. I had to leave my job to go to the IEP meeting. All the comments were complaints about my son's behavior. Do you know how many educators came in and had me sign something and walked out? It's like you're just being rushed through an assembly line. Or they were like scanning you through the grocery line, and then they moved. And often as professionals, we've got 3 other meetings. We have to take our child to the doctor. We know that maybe we have a good reason to leave. Families don't always know that. If we say at the beginning how much time we have, and if we have to leave, say we can reschedule if we need to. And it's often when I'm at the grocery store, I want all of us to think about this. I watch that scanner, and I think, that's how long families feel. They're being scanned through. And that's not what anybody intends to do, but we have to do the behaviors to prevent that. I was at an IEP meeting recently as an advocate for a family, and I was shocked that the assistant principal said, I'm here in the role of the general ed teacher, because the general ed teacher is a required member of the team. And then somebody else said, well, I'm here in the role of the speech therapist. And I did not speak up because we had bigger fish to fry in that meeting than that. But I talked with them later, and I said, that doesn't count. As an assistant principal, you can't be in the role of the general ed teacher. You're not the general ed teacher. You know, you need to get a general ed teacher there or reschedule. But we can't have fake roles. You know, and so we have to be really earnest. Again, when families are complimented by the teacher, what can families do? Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Cece, for doing such a remarkable job with not suspending students, but having restorative practices for them to learn. Families need to be giving compliments. Families need to care that the teacher's husband just had surgery or something else. That we care, we empathize, we're kind, we express positive. Think what that does to the tone of the meeting. That's when you start breathing the mountain air of Dr. King, of going to the mountaintop, when there's this positivity that is permeating and people really feeling like a team. Then there is the component of sharing future visions. And the professionals need to invite the student, if he or she is there, what are they looking forward to in middle school? And what would they like, you know, when they graduate from high school? What do they want to really be good at? Do they have any idea of the job they might want in the future? This, of course, depends on the age of the child. But inviting the student to share a vision, inviting the families to share a vision, but the professionals also sharing a vision. Danny is so good in technology that I can really see him like working in a tech store. Maybe in a tech store, depending on Danny, maybe he might be a stockbroker. Maybe he might be a person who's on the staff. You know, maybe he might be any number of roles that there could be. The person, it doesn't mean that they need to have a college degree in technology and work in a tech store, but you're building on an interest. That just reminded me of, there was a student with quite severe autism who would pick little pieces of paper all the time, and if there was anything on the wall of the classroom or the school, the student would want to just pick it off in little pieces. It was like an obsession. And at the IEP meeting, the teacher said, I can really see John being a wallpaper assistant. And when the wallpaper is being taken down and there are all these little pieces left, he would be the best person to make sure all the wallpaper is down. It's a wonderful way to take this behavior that can be challenging and find a way for it to be needed and for it to be paid. And so for the families, if the professionals don't share visions or don't invite visions, to say, before we get into the evaluation, let's just take a minute here for visions. So families can help direct the agenda as well as the professional. Then our fourth part is reviewing evaluation and data and levels of performance, especially when there's a new evaluation or when the evaluation is a re-evaluation every 3 years. And in these instances, we want professionals to use clear terminology to avoid all that evaluation jargon of stanines and grade equivalents and all of these terms that don't translate to the general public. And for families to ask, what does that mean? Could you clarify that? Give me an example. It would help me if, in hearing Jay's weaknesses and where he's low, What did you find the biggest strengths? So families can help move that in a positive direction by their questions and comments. Given them time, I'm going to wind up in just 5 minutes or less. You get to the place of specifying appropriately ambitious goals. And we want to remember that that shouldn't just be the goals that were not met from last year. Why were they not met? What was the problem? How do we recalibrate instruction? Is that the best goal anyway? And how can we make sure there's progress? And my work on due process hearings, I have found one of the weakest things about IEP, about goals, is one of the requirements is to specify the evaluation criteria and procedures and schedules for documenting progress of each goal. And so often, that is poorly stated on the IEP, and there's very little progress monitoring of goals. Families need to ask, where is your data? Please share your data that you've taken to document my child's progress on that goal. And teachers need to provide that so they don't even need to be asked. Determining the nature and supports and services to ensure progress, not to ensure attendance, not to ensure benefit, but to ensure progress. This is another huge area of weakness. IDEA requires that students with disabilities receive supplementary services and supports in their general ed classroom before they are removed. And if with those supplementary services and supports like assistive technology and more individualized instruction and technology, video games to learn, and universal design for instruction to know exactly what it is that best helps that student learn. Positive behavior support. If all of that doesn't work, then you can consider something more restricted. And on so many IEPs I've seen, this student needs to be in a special class so they can receive supplementary aids and services. Wrong. We all need to advocate for research-based supplementary aids and services to be in the general ed classroom before removal to a more restricted setting. Very important. And finally, the conclusion of the meeting, when we can go around and say, what's the last thing on your mind? We don't want anybody leaving saying, I wish I had said. I didn't have a chance to say. So we give everybody a chance to say what's on their mind. We talk about how we're going to communicate in the future. We affirm the benefits of the trusting partnership, of how wonderful it's been to have this reciprocal exchange. And so, my friends, I want you to remember the 5 dimensions of partnership. I want you to download this PowerPoint and read it again. And before you have your next IEP meeting, read it again, because there's a lot here. And to remember, with the sunshine model, to keep your face always toward the sun, and the shadows will fall behind you. To remember the sunshine model. I love the quote from Gandhi, to be the change you want to see in the world. And you may be thinking, nobody at my school has meetings like this, or never been to a meeting like this. Be the change. I love what Michelle Obama said, don't we all? Let's do it together. When they go low, we go high. Let's do it again. When they go low, we go high. So no matter if other people in the meeting go low, you go high and even higher to make up for that. And then this last thing, I want you to help me. Just, I hope you'll remember this. Get your hands up. We're going to do this twice. What goes around comes back around. One more time. What goes around comes back around. And what goes around comes back around. Keep your circle positive. That doesn't mean you can't say concerning things. You can say those so much easier if the meeting is positive. Speak good words. Think good thoughts. Do good deeds. And you really can go to the mountaintop. You can create the mountain. And I encourage you, I challenge you, and I believe in you that you are going to go around and you are going to be a catalyst in the meeting, regardless of your role of creating trust, empathy, kindness, appropriately ambitious goals and promise. Thank you.
Wasn't she great? We all learned a lot every day, and from the dynamic meeting. Thank you so much. Please join me in giving her another round of applause. This is the certificate of appreciation. And the beautiful flowers, which of course she deserves entirely. Thank you. And for the announcement, I think it's going to be pretty confessional.
Thank you, you guys. Now we're going to take a quick 7-minute break. We need to clear out the room so that they can go ahead and put the partitions up for our sessions. Thank you.